point of this video is to give me the chance to examine with you an alternative to the only flood prevention scheme called the Western Conveyancing Corridor for Oxford. My scheme will feature the following: the chronic lack of maintenance on our waterways over the last 20 to 30 years. It will examine the local man-made features that could contribute to flood prevention, producing what I call the Balanced Flood Alleviation Scheme for Oxford. This has been compiled over a lifetime of experience, and I'm now going to explore why I think I'm qualified to do this. My name is Tom Balance, and I was born 56 years ago in a very nice little spot next door to Binsey Church, and this is situated to the west of Oxford.
In my teens and early 20s, I worked on a number of farms, again in this area, and they're all affected by the Thames floodplain. My family ran Bossom's Boatyard from 1952 right through to 2004, and I was managing director for the last 23 years of that period. The boatyard is situated right on the edge of Portmeadow and to the west of Oxford and on the banks of the River Thames. And if you look behind you now, you can see a fantastic picture painted by my grandfather in 1955 of the view from Bossom's looking north over Portmeadow and with Wolvercote in the distance. In recent times I founded a stand-up paddleboarding club, Sup for You Oxford, and I have probably spent more time on the water in the last 2.5 years observing all things river-wise than I ever did in my previous life. And in conclusion, I would like to think that I am probably one of the most experienced watermen for my age in this area on this part of the Thames. I have been campaigning on flood defence issues on the Thames for many years, and in this video now I'm going to explore with you all those different situations and also in the end come to the conclusions. So this is the starter map, just so that we can get our bearings of where we're going to be talking about. So firstly we're going to look and say this is Oxford city centre just here. Then Botley Road runs down here, just there. It continues on to be the A420 and go off to Swindon like so. The A34 starts in the south and comes up through here and goes to the north. The A40 starts in the east over here and goes right across to the west going off to Witney. And this large white area here is Portmeadow. And finally, very well illustrated, is the Thames, and it runs from here through underneath the A34, around Portmeadow, down by Osney, and beyond and through Oxford. We're now going to go through to the flood map, and it looks a little bit like this. You can see first of all that I have rotated it by 90 degrees, and that north is facing over to the right there, just there. Now, there are two main elements to look at within this map. One are the rivers, and the second are the causeways which cross most of the rivers. And we're now going to look at the A34. The A34 runs through here for 1.5 miles, right across the floodplain. The second causeway is the A40, which runs up here. The third causeway is Botley Road, which runs right across the floodplain again. And the final one is this causeway which runs along the banks of the River Thames just here. Now you'll notice it's mostly in blue, apart from the top bit which is missing, and I'll be coming to this later. The only other things to note on the map are, in the 1920s, the Edwardians piled a load of Edwardian rubbish just here to stop Oxford being flooded. So with a combination of that and this other causeway, it restricts the outflow of Portmeadow, which is here. Godstow Lock is just there, and Binsey Church, where I was born, is just here. The Perch Public House is just there, and Bossom's Boatyard, as I've spoke about already, is just here. And finally, Osney Lock down the bottom here. What I've done with this map is to simplify things in terms of flood levels, and What I've called them is flood level 1, which is here, which is above the A34, which runs here. Flood level 2, which is basically Port Meadow. Flood level 3, which is basically Binsey and Botley, north of Botley Road. And flood level 4 is beyond Botley Road. And first of all, if we just follow the Thames right through this map, it starts at the top right hand corner, it comes down here through underneath the A34, past Godstow Lock, around Port Meadow, underneath Botley Road, and then to Oasley Lock and beyond. 2/3 of the water that is above the A34 goes through 3 weirs from flood level 1 to flood level 2. These are the Wolvercote Mill Stream weir, which is just here. And there are 2 other weirs, and they come down the main and split by the Trout Pub and by the lock just there. And they dump themselves into the top of Port Meadow. The other third actually runs along the Seacourt Stream, which starts here and comes round by Whiteham underneath the A34 and into flood level 3 down to Botley Road and beyond. Right, now we're going to look at the role that the A34 could play in protecting Oxford from flooding. Early 1960s, the road was put in. It's positioned right across the Thames flood plain, and it runs for 1.5 miles from here to here. And the area immediately above it, which we've called flood level area 1, is 1 to 2 square miles. It's obstructing the water flow, and there are basically a number of underpasses where the water has to travel. And it's fantastically set up because it has the main River Thames in the middle, Seacourt Stream is on the southern side, so it frames it that end, and then the Wolvercote Mill Stream frames it this end. They're all the white stars. The red stars are flood level underpasses which only work when there's a serious amount of flooding. And there are 2 just north of the Thames, and then there are 2 spaced out beautifully on the other side as well. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go and look at these to give you the further background, and I'm going to come back with a conclusion at the end. So the first bit we're going to look at, which is the Wolvercote Mill Stream and what happens if flood water would hit this end.
At the northern end with a lovely lake, and as we turn round we look north, and as you can see that the lake behind us is at least 2 feet lower than what's in the mill stream because of the mill weir, which looks very like this and keeps the water back and higher in the Wolvercote Mill Stream. But as we walk up the bank, you can see how high the bank is on the far side of the Wolvercote Mill Stream, and it would never overflood this. I've now moved downstream slightly to show you what a fantastic bridge goes over this Wolvercote Mill Stream, and from here we're going down to the weir. I've now moved south back to Wolvercote Mill Stream weir, and as you can see I'm pointing towards one of the sluice gates which is closed, which is quite a surprise. All this water now downstream of here is at Port Meadow level.
We're now going to move down to underpass number 2, and in actual fact I decided to visit this with a paddleboard across the field, and this is what happened. Tuesday the 11th of February 2014, and I'm here proving how much water is pressing up against the A34. And I'm just about to come underneath one of the archways that underpasses, and here it is. Wow, now that is very interesting. So clearly we've got an obstruction, and it's basically a rapid. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. That is not what I was expecting at all. So this is quite interesting. So obviously these gates are holding back the water big time. So that is like a serious rapid. Wow. Well, that was actually quite interesting.
I've now turned round And what's amazing is how much water is being held back by a couple of flimsy gates. A few days later, I came back here and released these gates to make sure the water could get through. And if you look at this next bit, you'll see the effect that that had on the overall flow.
Coming down. And the interesting fact is that we actually have just over 18 inches at the far side where I've just measured. There's the current. What I'm about to do now is to measure what we've got coming through this side. And as you can see there, it's just over 11 inches. So that makes 7 inches drop from the upstream side of the A34 to the downstream side through this.
A few more days now went by and the levels started to equal themselves out, and it looked a little bit like this.
There is a flood. This is what's happening here. And if you think about it, this has been here for 50 years and it's unmarked. They have constructed this in such a way to deal with this, and therefore if you wish to, like the gates which are there, which I'm going to focus in on now, just there, those gates were across here and stopping it. And that day it was 20 inches that side and only 6 inches this. So it's making a remarkable difference. Well, I've now just jumped over the fence out of the field from cattle pass number 2, and the water's being held up by at least 6 to 8 inches, and you can see what's happening here. It's just full of mud. So it's amazing how such a little amount can hold a massive amount of water back, and that surely could be applied to the A34 with these underpasses that I'm highlighting. We're now going to look at the Thames underpass here, and there's a couple of very interesting things going on there underneath the A34 now, where the Thames pass underneath. So this is underpass number 4, it's the middle one, and the flow is flowing nicely, although on the far side there are some reeds, and you can see things sticking out the water just there.
As you can see from this aerial picture, this is now really quite badly silted up and needs to be dredged out as it's a pinch point.
As the flow comes round the outside here, and we've been doing it for many years obviously, as you come round here it's hitting this bank which is just here, and if I now move out and not fall in at the same time, you can see it's hitting a sort of end which it's eroding away effectively, so and creating quite a wash into the middle there. So in the end I suspect the whole of that bank will disappear. We're now going to go to number 5, and I walk right underneath the A34. The lorry's going by there, and this is what I call cattle underpass number 5. This has got 2.5 feet of water flowing through it today, and we're not at full flood, we're still waiting for the water to come down.
So I now decide to make my way through to the downstream side, and if we look at the condition of this underpass, it is in really good condition considering it's 50 years old. Also some quite nice graffiti there. Also I decide I have to turn the camera on its side to give us a decent picture with such a strange feeling. As we come through, we now see the fence in the distance, and this is actually stopping the water, and to the point where the floodwater is being held back.
Allow the water to bank up against the A34, and obviously it is currently a Thames barrier because 2.5 feet of water against it. And finally we're going to go and look at the Seacourt stream and the view from the southern end.
If we now look at this scene and the willow trees in the foreground with the undoubted silt that would have collected underneath them, they are creating a blockage at this underpass and restricting the
Seacourt stream going underneath it. As you can see, it banks beautifully as you come round this way. A34 with lots of traffic, and also a lot of water pressed up against it, literally all the way along the line of there. And if we just zoom into that, that's really self-evident. In conclusion, the way it would work, the underpasses would need to be cleaned out. All of them need some work, some more than others. Slab sluice gates would be installed where the stars are in red at the flood underpasses only, not the rivers. In the height of the river flood, these would be increased in terms of level and be blocked off up to 3 to 4 feet. And if it ever reached, say, the maximum of 4 feet, it would simply overflow and still continue to flood through these areas. This would increase the area of water held behind the A34 and would increase the flow through the rivers. And the fantastic thing is it gives the authorities the ability to take flood level 1 water through to flood level 2 directly by controlling these two, or control these two by letting water through from flood level 1 directly to 3, or they could adjust them by putting and looking at the levels in each different position and working out which is going to be best. Now this is just one part of the overall plan, and we're now going to go on to the next bit, which is the overflow and erosion just down from Godstow Lock, which is the green bit just here.
This is a very nice aerial picture that illustrates this, how the towpath is missing, and in a moment you'll see the lock that will come into view. We're then going to go on to why this has happened and an explanation.
If you look at the map now, you have this old ancient causeway which was installed by our ancestors 200 years ago. And it's about 50 foot wide up to this point here, but the last bit from here to Godstow Lock was only ever about 8 feet wide. And in the last 30 years has been eroded away. We're now going to look at some pictures of how this erosion has taken place.
This picture was taken in 1979 of a perfect towpath. If you look to the left, the land is all level and it would never potentially flood because of its height. 35 years later, you can see the result. The towpath is completely missing and it's totally waterlogged when it's flooded like this. And we are now going to go into the effect that this has on flooding in Binsey and Botley.
And the result is that the water from the 3 weirs which I described earlier is escaping out of the Thames only at height of flood, and it is flowing down overland and 2 particular ditches. One is called Overflow Ditch, which runs from Godstow Overflow to Seacourt Stream, and the other one is called Swift Ditch, which runs down through here and again comes in a bit further down the Seacourt Stream. Now you've had a chance to look at it, what I believe should happen is that the towpath should be resurrected, completely filled back in so it's all one level, but another sluicegate, slab sluicegate installed here, very much like the ones on the overflow underpasses on the A34, and a level could be set at where it would overflow as a natural overflow point for the top of Port Meadow, which floods every time anyway because of the constriction down this end. This would be a far better option than currently, which is just overflowing when it floods at will in an uncontrollable way. Right, we're now going to move down to the Botley Road, which is the causeway that runs right across again the floodplain. And if we start with the Thames, which is the easternmost part here, the underpass is absolutely fine, there's no problem there, apart from there is a little slab sluicegate which has rotted, and it looks very like this. Of Botley Road Bridge on the Thames itself. And this is an overflow section here which runs off into Oseney Stream. Is actually a sluice gate, and there are 3 sections to it, and on the far side there you can see it's actually flowing sort of over something. In actual fact you can see evidence this side of it doing so, but in the middle there is nothing, and it's a wooden sort of sluice gate paddle, and basically the bit is missing, it's just rotted away. It's flowing around Oseney Island and then beyond Oseney Lock. But if too much water comes over here, obviously the houses on Oseney Island could get flooded and needs to be replaced. If we move west now, you've got a beautiful 7-arched old-fashioned bridge which only ever flows through the middle of the middle 2 archways really, and it looks a little bit like this. We can see what's happening. We're 2.5 in the middle are going well, these two end ones are not, and the farm ones are hardly running at all. The whole series of trees, including one that's now blocked it up slightly. 20 to 30 trees here, which have established themselves over some considerable time, and as you can see, they really have made a little wood for themselves. And this needs to be seriously cleaned out, particularly above it with a whole bunch of trees which have blocked it up. We move one stage further west again. This is now the Bulstrode stream, and it's fed from the Thames from here. It's called the Botley stream, which comes down to here. There is a serious amount of willow trees, and I'm going to show those to you in a minute, along with the actual underpass that seriously needs to be cleared out. Not just the trees, but the silt needs to be cleared out as well, and they look like this. As you can see, a bus has just gone by. We're on Botley Road, looking at the Bulstrode stream as it goes underneath the Botley Road, and this is the area where the Thames water main comes up and goes over into Oxford. And as you can see, here's the actual tree that's blocking it up, and as we come through you can appreciate how big it is. And this is the bit they're supposed to be clearing out, or they've agreed to do so. Now move to the back, or north, of Botley Road, and we're looking at the junction of Botley Road stream and the Bulstrode stream, which is on the right from as we look at it now. And as you can see, there are a phenomenal number of trees here, and you can't even really tell where the rivers come together. Now we finally moved down to the final underpass underneath Botley Road, where Seacourt stream goes underneath it, which is just here. In actual fact, this is the place where the authorities' Western Conveyancing Corridor starts, just north of there, just this area here. And there is a flaw in their plan, because there isn't enough water in this area generally here to satisfy a new Western Conveyancing Corridor. They would have to come up above the A34 here to get the excess water, or they'd have to come to flood level 2, because that is where the majority of the water is. As part of my plan, I need the bypass of the Thames, which has always been there, to work to 100%, and this is the Seacourt stream, but it only needs to be dredged from where it underpasses underneath the A34 and runs down through underneath the Botley Road and beyond down to Sandford. I'm now going to show you the area where I'm circling now to indicate to you how bad this is silted up. I'm now halfway between the Botley Road and the A34 on the Seacourt stream, which is the bypass stream for the Thames on Oxford. And if we look in the foreground now at these lovely old willow trees which have been pollarded over many, many years, and that was the river bank, and I'm now stood what was the river. And then you look at the self-seeded trees that have been put here now and the silting that's occurred. The river now is barely a third of its width, original width. And this needs to be dredged out, and these trees need to be cleared. So in conclusion, it needs to be cleared in its entire length. Right, now the very final part of the Balanced Flood Alleviation Scheme for Oxford would be to take into consideration 3 different villages which need embankment flood protection. Firstly, at Whiteham here there needs some flood protection here, along with a couple of houses in the mill house just here, at Lower Wolvercote just here, and then off the map down here South Hinksey, which have just had some temporary ones installed, would need to be made on a permanent basis.
Due to media coverage and the pressure that I have been able to apply, the Environment Agency are now engaging with me in conversation regarding all of the issues that I have raised. They have also agreed that they will remove the trees on the Bulstrode stream near Botley Road and just upstream of there.
This graph demonstrates that we would hope to achieve maximum flow of floodwater through Oxford here until we reach the critical flood line here. At this point, we would look to hold back some of the water at the A34 and at the new sluice gate at Godstow Overflow.
So in conclusion, with a comprehensive maintenance programme completed and a control of floodwater through the A34 and at Godstow creates a balanced approach to flood management in Oxford, not only helping the city of Oxford but also its neighbours downstream. This is why I call this the Balanced Flood Alleviation Scheme for Oxford.